Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about government's efforts to stabilize economy. Now, this is, I think, the biggest challenge for the current government. The fuel prices were once again raised, and they are at the highest level ever, almost 59 rupees as far as diesel is concerned. And when you talk about petrol, it is touching well over 230 rupees a litre. Now, the transportation cost is going to go up, and it will bring in a lot of inflation also, because the prices will go up. You talk about construction industry, you talk about any other related. For example, if a certain company is delivering the goods from point A to point B, the cost is going to be paid by the final consumer. It is going to be passed on eventually. But looking at the current purchasing power, which has eroded significantly during the last couple of months, I would say, now again, there is a challenge. How to control inflation? Number one, which hasn't arrived yet, by the way, because it is expected by the month of August and September, the real effect is going to be there. Number two, the interest rate is around 13.75%. They have to raise it further to control inflation, but directly or indirectly it is related. Talking about the food basket, that used to be around 40% of the overall inflation. Now it's around 60%. Edible oil again increased. That is one of the major imports that you do, around $4.5 to $5 billion a year. That's a lot of money you're talking about, primarily from Indonesia and Malaysia. The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has significantly improved the prices of wheat, fertilizer, edible oil, sunflower cooking oil for that matter. 30% of the global production of wheat is in Russia and in Ukraine. There are ships having the grain, but they cannot move. Obviously, a lot of pressure on the certain products. On top of that, electricity prices have been raised by 47%, gas prices by 45%. I'm talking about in real terms, so the overall effect is going to be much more, because the compound effect is always there. And then currently, last night I was listening to Mufti Ismail Saab, the finance minister, and he was saying that we understand that this is going to be a very, very tough patch for the public, but there is no other choice. Nobody else is ready to give us any money, or rather lend us any money, other than the International Monetary Fund. And obviously, when you talk about IMF, certain tough conditions are always attached and associated. Now, whatever is happening now, or even prior, even during the budget, Mufti Saab mentioned that the IMF isn't happy. We'll have to do more, like to squeeze more, put more taxes on those people who are already paying taxes. Well, the government needs money to run their daily affairs. But having said that, who is going to pay for that? Unfortunately, in Pakistan, the poor are paying for the rich. It's the other way around in all over the rest of the world. The rich, they make money, and the poor gets the benefit. Over here, we have targeted subsidies. Mufti Saab again mentioned yesterday that if we do not increase the prices of fuel, that is going to be somewhat around 100 billion rupees a month. That is 1,200 billion rupees a year, and the government cannot afford that. Well, if that is the case, how to move forward? That is going to be a challenge and a half. Good news is that when we looked at the economic survey of Pakistan, most of these indicators which determine the overall growth of any country were positive. 6% growth rate was recorded, 5.97 to be exact. And then on top, your large-scale manufacturing, your agriculture, your services sector, they have shown significant growth. What else needs to be done? This is the question in our today's program. Let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio Amir Hussain Saab. He's a senior columnist, writer. Thank you very much, Amir Saab, for your time, sir. And we also have with us on Skype Dr. Hasanain Saab, Associate Professor at Economics Department, LUMS, and he is also the outgoing head of the LUMS Economics Department. Thank you very much, Dr. Hasanain Saab, for your presence in our show, sir. Pleasure to have you. And we'll also be talking to Dr. Ikram Saab, taxation expert, and we'll be talking to him over the phone. But let me put the first question to you. Amir Hussain Saab, obviously negotiations are underway with the IMF to revive the program. Certain conditions have been attached, and very tough conditions for the general public. They also aim to widen the tax base. This is what we've been hearing for the last God knows how many decades. Nothing has happened so far. Certain areas like agriculture, for that matter, your retail, your wholesale, they are not paying what they should have been paying. 1% totally is what the retail sector pays you, whereas agriculture sector, because most of these transactions are handled in cash, so we do not know exactly. Now they have added a tax on luxury goods, non-productive assets. Perhaps real estate is going to be another target. Most of the money is normally invested in that particular sector, and the daily transactions, as we all know, that concept of files, that's a new phenomenon as well. And targeting increasing exports and curtailing the imports, obviously that is a basic formula. But how to do it? These are the challenges, sir. The current government, I would say, no matter what they do, at the end of the day, the real effect is going to be around August and September. They will have to increase the prices furthermore, and the trickle-down effect of those prices will not be the actual percentage of increase. It is going to be having that compound effect, and that is going to be very hard to sort of digest or absorb. So.
Well, unfortunately, we are living in a very difficult time. Last 4 years, economic policies, they didn't pay off. And now the coalition government had two choices. One was to go for popular budget, which they didn't have the fiscal space to, establish a popular base for through budget. The second was the IMF conditionalities, which were the strings are attached to whatever we do. Pakistan had to make a better choice, and better choice was to go for a stabilization program through IMF, and then of course we need urgent money to pay off many things that we are now lingering with. I think this is tough time, but the government is a coalition government, which is a short-term government. It's not it's not going to have 5 years to do that. So they are perhaps the dilemma is that they have to have some popular support, but they will also have to ensure that the economy revives, it comes back, and for that you have to take very unpopular and drastic decisions that the government is taking. I think the difficult time is ahead for July, August and September. How to come out of this? It's a long-term challenge, because most of the factors are linked to international scenario as well. Because the energy crisis is as you know, is a global crisis now. The oil prices have gone up in international market. The American economy is also in recession, our biggest, one of the biggest trade partners in the world, and they have also increased their, interest rate. The Federal Reserve's, the American Central Bank has increased by 75 basis point, which is huge increase, which means that they are feeling a recession. In terms of recession, if then they are going to impact our exports as well, because the buying power will go down, our export will go down.
America is the largest trading partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we are talking about reducing the imports, that is another challenge, because some of the revenue comes through the tariffs on imports. If you reduce
actually the most amount of money you collect is through the money you make on the imports.
If you reduce the imports, then what is the alternate? How would you counterbalance by suddenly you cannot improve the export because international recession is there. So there are tough times ahead. I think most of the things have to do with international market. If it becomes better, if the war in Ukraine is over and the situation becomes normalized, then there is a chance for Pakistan to revive. I think in this there's one positive thing in that if there's a global recession, then the oil prices will come down, because the purchasing power in international market for oil will be reduced. So that is one area where Pakistan can have some cushion for the future.
So primarily you're saying that if there is less consumption of energy, in particular fuel,
the
growth is going to go down as well. But having said that, the prices will be, in some sort of a bracket.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's the precarious international situation. Pakistan has always been, unfortunately, when we talk about budget each year, we talk about reforms, we talk about widening the net, the tax net, which we don't do actually. Right now, we need to, now this is the international situation, but internally we have to widen the tax net to bring those, giants into the, taxation, which is the only way to create some fiscal, option for the country to make some choices.
Because I think when you talk about taxation, I think the most important factor is that if there is less growth, so your collection is going to be reduced for sure. Yeah. And secondly, when the purchasing power isn't there, so obviously less transactions are taking place, so that is again going to affect that. Yeah. But the only option that is there and you're left with is to increase the tax base and bring in more people.
Absolutely.
Now, technically speaking, sir, about 70 that means around how much? 7 crore 70 lakh people should be taxed. These are the people who are at the earning end. But again, if you look at the number of people who are not in the tax net because of the income issue, because certain amount cannot be taxed. Yeah. You have to have a certain number of earning. Exactly. Yeah. So everything is because if you fix one thing, another thing gets affected. Absolutely. And this is a continuous cycle. But let's hear out from Dr. Ali what he has to share regarding the overall economic turbulence, I will say. Ali Saab, now one important factor is that for any government, for any economist, for that matter, anybody who is into finance, this is a real challenge, especially if you look at the current situation of Pakistan as far as the economic situation is concerned. It is a challenge and a half for anyone. The current government blames the Imran Khan regime, the Imran Khan blames the PMLN and People's Party. It's not a new phenomena, sir. It's been there. I think we lost what we could have done in 80s and 90s and during the last 2 decades when the world was flourishing and we were so-called the closest non-NATO ally of the Americans. At the end of the day, we were ditched. We wasted everything. We wasted our efforts. We lost around $140 billion. We ended up having sacrifices from 80,000 people who lost their lives. Almost 300,000 were injured in one way or the other, lost their limbs and so on and so forth. Look at the amount of men in uniform who fought for this cause and eventually ended up dying or getting martyred. Now, where are we heading, sir? It seems it's a rudderless plane without a pilot, without any controls. Your take, sir.
So, thank you. First of all, I'd like to encourage you to think about the poverty of our ideas. As economists, as a society conversing about the economy, we've got only 2 or 3 ideas that we have, one of which is that we enter into a stabilization program. So whether we'll come to the IMF or not, what the IMF wants us to do, that's one part of the conversation. And then when we have some fiscal rule, we talk about creating subsidies, we talk about government relief for the poor. We haven't really spent enough time thinking about why it is that the economy is structurally flawed. And you said, you talked about the 80s and 90s. If you look at history, I think the first foreign loan that was taken was at least as early as Bhutto the Elder going to the Shah of Iran for a bilateral loan. So that's at least as far back as I know. There might have been loans earlier than that. And throughout, we've got a very clear pattern of what we do wrong. So what we do wrong, in fact, it's interesting. There has been work written, 20, 30 years ago, identifying exactly the pattern and identifying the solutions, and we are still stuck in the same pattern. So very briefly, the problem is, number one, as you correctly identified, we don't tax enough. So in this country, our tax rate is about half that of our peer countries, and that creates a lot of fiscal room. If you can solve that problem, it creates a lot of fiscal room for the government to take
People
action.
do not trust the governments because they believe that whatever money is taken, let me use another word, snatched away from them, it's not used on the actual services which the government has promised. Education, you just look at the amount of money. So you have houses worth more than that. In Islamabad, just 3 houses put together is what the entire government is allocated for the education. Forget about the health, sir. These are the 2 major areas where the government should give some sort of subsidy or something. Gone.
It doesn't
And
matter.
when you talk about defense, yes, sir, Pakistan needs that, but at the end of the day,
I haven't talked about defense. I'll come to defense if you want. But
Please.
first, let's talk about what you just said. So it does not matter that our service delivery is poor. If you look at other countries in the world, service delivery is poor in a lot of countries that are able to tax more. So this is a chicken and egg problem. If the government had twice the resources it does now, some of that would surely sort of reflect in better health, better education. The problem is that in no country in the world do people pay taxes completely voluntarily. There is always the sort of the arm of the law, the long arm of the government or the state behind the tax collector. Our problem is that we have not invested the political energy to tax the rich. And we have systematically kept large tracts of
so you end up giving so many subsidies to the richest of the rich in Pakistan. Come on, I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. And what sort of input have they eventually given us in terms of exports? That has never been disclosed.
Look, there are multiple things going on here. Let me be very clear what I'm saying. The first thing is that we aren't taxing the rich enough. Number 2, you're moving on to subsidies. That's exactly right, that our only solution for improving the economy is subsidies. We have no other imagination. We can't think of how better service delivery will get these firms more competitive internationally. And then what happens is that instead of, so the only way that we encourage exports right now is that we say, let's go and subsidize exporting industries, which we do quite significantly. And then we ban imports because we think, our imports are actually significantly less than they are in other countries of a similar level of development. Our problem is not imports. We don't import more than peer countries. We export less. And that links to our productivity. If you look at the complexity of what we make, that has declined since the 80s and 90s. So the answers to why this is the case lies deeper, but my frustration is that the conversation never moves beyond the IMF subsidies or government relief for the poor.
All right. Now, we've also been joined in by Dr. Ikram ul Haq Saab. He's an expert on taxation. Dr. Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Okay.
Dr. Saab, am I audible, sir? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So, if you could speak a little louder, because I just cannot actually make out what you're saying.
Yes.
All right. Now, Dr. Saab, we were just having a word with Dr. Ali Hasanain Saab, Associate Professor at Economics Department, LUMS, and Dr. Saab mentioned that now more taxation is the way forward. I mean, because I'm going to put my question regarding to your field, sir. So, income tax will be increased. Purchasing power of any person, I'm not talking about the one from the lower middle class or the middle class, everyone across the board, the purchasing power has gone down. If you are going to introduce new taxes or perhaps increase the percentage of tax in certain type of taxes, let me put it this way, sir, this is going to be an absolute disaster, because look at the fuel prices, look at the utility prices, look at the basic commodities and their prices, the way they have gone up. Fuel is going to add a lot of inflation, sir, which is almost at 15% according to certain sources. Interest rate is hovering around 14%. I mean, when you look at these numbers, sir, they really confuse you. The only way forward is to bring in more people in your tax net and reduce the overall number of percentage of taxes, and at the same time that trust deficit that is there between the tax department and a normal taxpayer, sir. And on top, one more important factor, sir, make your taxation system easy to understand for a normal layman also, because I think it is very difficult for even for educated people how to fill in the forms and all. I mean, since it's such a complicated issue, sir, what's wrong? I mean, automation is the solution, or man-to-man dealing perhaps is going to be the final way forward? I fail to understand what's going on.
Yes, Pakistan tax system needs paradigm shift. We have written a lot about it, that you need reforms holistically. We have a very narrow tax base and as well as puncture tax base, as we have mentioned many a times. The problem is that at least there should be in personal taxation not less than 20 million people to be on tax filing register rather than just we are relying on withholding taxes. For example, at the moment we have 116 million broadband users. And out of that, you can easily find out the tax base for your personal income taxation. So personal income taxation is very important, but at the same time, we must broaden the tax base and reduce the tax rates. Because in peculiar Pakistani circumstances, when state is not providing even basic facilities, we cannot think of tax rates or personal incomes as we are in many other countries, or historically in the Western countries where the people have all the basic facilities from the state. So my point of view is that if you want to make your tax simplified, what you can do is that you can provide alternate base that is some percentage of net worth, so that the people with high net worth, they end up paying more tax. But obviously, there should be no much tax on income, because in Pakistan, specific circumstances, I would say capital formation is very important. But as far as corporate taxation is concerned, we must distinguish between two. Unfortunately, Pakistan treats personal income taxation and is mixed up with corporate taxation. In other countries, corporate taxation is altogether a different subject. While you need to lower the corporate rate at say 20%, which is standard at the moment, and you have broad base, you have a strict audit parameters, and companies are not understating their incomes, then 20% is a good model. But at the same time, when we see in the background of rising fuel prices, we should have excess profit tax or a tax on windfall gains. So that is what people do when this kind of situation arises. Now, they have slammed proposed high tax rates for banks. I think it is okay if they think that banking industry has windfall profits and they should penalize them. But then there should be equal treatment to other companies. For example, why not to cement sector, and more all of them is oil refineries, oil companies. They have minted a lot of money during this period, and even in US, they are now many groups are advocating that we must have windfall tax on this big oil companies. So obviously, taxation is not a static thing. You have to keep on altering according to your circumstances. When we reach a stage where we have a society where basic amenities and basic fundamental rights of people and their fundamental entitlements are provided, then you can go for higher personal income tax rates as well. But at the moment, since our per capita income is very low, and even a large size of middle class, and with at least 60 million young people yet not entered into workforce, we cannot overburden their families who are mostly taking care of their finances for education to impose heavy income taxation on them. I am of the view that high net worth people, although, must pay higher tax, that we can shift the base from
Dr. Sir,
income
if I may ask a question, that now we have also learned that obviously there were conditions attached from the International Monetary Fund, and they said that subsidies should be taken away. Obviously, fuel prices should be increased, which the government has. Most likely they will go further up. You talk about the cost of electricity increased by 47%, cost of your gas increased by almost 45%, and now they are aiming at increasing the income tax, perhaps the income tax rates. Now, sir, there is a proposal that those who earn around 2.4 million, that is 24 lakh rupees a year, to 36 lakh rupees a year. That means that somebody who is making 2 lakh rupees a month to 3 lakh rupees a month, the rate of tax should be around 12.5%, right, sir?
Yeah.
And those who are earning more than 3 lakh rupees, that is going to be 17.5%, sir. And then on top, you're talking about further pressure on them because of the inflation. You're also talking about high fuel prices, you're talking about high high prices, obviously, as far as utility bills are concerned. Sir, this is going to primarily hit your middle class and even upper middle class. Now, this is something where I think the government needs to reevaluate their strategy. Don't you think it's important? Money collection on one side, it sounds really good. And then trust deficit between the public and the government, that isn't there. It is going to get eroded further, sir. Your take.
I agree with you, but I have 2 points to make. One is that as far as circular debts in electricity and gas are concerned, they are mostly the issue of governance and bad management. So, energy or sector has to be reformed holistically as our tax system should be. So we should keep it different from other fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is basically that we have failed to reform our tax system and our spending system. So if, as I have been saying that in, for example, fuel prices we take, we have been charging for petroleum levy and under the name of sometime development, but there was a commission formed by Supreme Court of Pakistan, and they came to the conclusion that in 10 years we collected as much as 10 trillion rupees under the head petroleum levy. So where that money had gone. So if we want to reduce the import of oil, we must have to provide a decent transport system. Now we are even imposing 70% tax on our electric vehicles. So if we don't have electricity problem fixed, from where we will get our electricity vehicles charged? So it's all a vicious circle. In all, we must not forget that reforms in one sector alone will not work. We will have to take economy as a whole. And when I say that we should take economy as a whole, I say that in all areas of governance, fiscal governance, you must provide solutions. Because we all know problems, but these solutions...
That makes a lot of sense, Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, if you allow me, let me put this question to our guest in the studio, Amir Saab. Amir Saab, now IMF is also talking about a certain digit, which was shown at, I think, 152, if I'm not wrong, billion. As a budget surplus. You know, surplus sounds so good, whether it's the current account surplus. Just imagine, I wish we were there, but unfortunately there's a big gap. You don't have the fiscal space, that's there. Budget surplus, it says 152 billion, and IMF says no, this is not possible. They're not only handling Pakistan, sir, they're handling a lot of other countries.
Absolutely.
And they do understand the capacity and the capability and the nature of the complex problems that we have, sir. And the global lender doubts that the credibility of these numbers, obviously, which is 152 billion, will not be there. Now, sir, anybody can come up with a certain number that, we will end up increasing the tax base to this level and certain segments will be targeted more, and eventually this is the number. See, budget surplus, and this is where the expenditure is going to be cut. Sir, everything in the global arena is getting expensive. Food shortage has been declared. So that means that if there is a food shortage and you end up getting 3 million tons of wheat from XYZ country, how will you pay? You're talking about deferred payments regarding your oil. You can't bring the entire country to a halt because last night one of the ministers was saying they have less tea. That is good. So I had just 1 cup, didn't have 2. So I'm actually helping Pakistani economy. Somebody else says that, reduce the amount of sugar, so that there is no shortage, the prices are going good. Sir, these are the formulas. Stop eating, stop wearing clothes, stop buying, stop moving, stop breathing, and everything is going to be fine. The point is, sir, it doesn't work like that. When Bhutto Saab said that, we will eat grass, but we'll make the bomb, nobody, in fact, had grass in their dinner. But the thing is that we ended up making the bomb because there was a strong will. No matter which government was in power, the establishment was towing a certain line against all odds, and they did it. What seems to be missing in this case, sir? Because now economy is the name of the game, and that is the topmost priority of any national security policy.
If you don't have a long-term plan, you will rely on guessworks. So these are all speculations. Economy is not only about the figures, and it's not only about statistical analysis. When growth rate is problematic, we had 6%, almost 6% growth rate, which in a week time it has evaporated. I mean, how does it happen? Because we have a structural problem. The economy has to go up with a long-term 10 to 20 years policy continuation.
Like China.
Yeah, you have to have a policy continuation. Otherwise, we could keep changing. This coalition government has 15 months. I mean, if you are optimistic, not more than 15 months. So any government will be thinking about the next election rather than thinking about economic revival, rather than structural.
Absolutely, everything revolves around the election.
Yeah. The problem
and
is
slogans,
that
fake promises.
We have big structural problems. Our agriculture reforms are needed. We are an agriculture country and we are importing wheat. Is it not a shame? And we, as a country, where 70% of our workforce should be in the agriculture sector, and this is the quick thing. I mean, we can turn around the economy if we focus on our agriculture, we improve it, and we improve the technology, we improve the output and all that. So this is one thing we can at least do without relying too much on international market. So why don't we do land reforms? It's another important question. Who will do that? And of course, then when
Bhutto Saab did it.
Yeah, I mean, you see, some sort of land
Indians
reform.
did it.
Indians did.
And look
Many
where they are.
countries do that. I think we have to now come out of this reducing cup of teas and all that. We have to think big. We have to see that we are in a big problem, and this reliance on international financial institutions is not a good sign for long term. You have to come out of this. For that, we have to identify the areas of comparative advantage. We have the sports goods, we had textile industry and all that. If you want to incentivize
Textile industry, and you were importing cotton. There was a time when you had the best cotton in the world. Now they talk about the Egyptian cotton. Which is 4 times costlier.
When we have gone down, and I think this is the right time to rethink, because you cannot squeeze people. You cannot tax more because you don't have purchase power. My purchase power has gone 25% down now as compared to last year. So I'm not able to pay more taxes as a common citizen of this country. So this is the situation. I mean, there is a vicious cycle. If you start to increase taxes and the inflation goes up to 17-18% and the people's purchasing power has gone down, then you will not be able to collect more taxes. I mean, there is huge frustration with the public. So I think this has political ramification as well. It has governance.
Last night,
and this is
Mufti Ismail Saab, or I think it was Dr. Musaddiq Malik most likely, he was saying that, look at Argentina, look at Turkey, and then we come as far as inflation is concerned. So thank you very much, sir, for your information.
Why we are going for bad examples? I mean, Argentina has 50%, 49% inflation right now.
40% almost. Yeah. In the United States of America also.
Yeah. And the international economy is going into recession, and we have to understand that we have to pull.
And Argentina is a perfect example of how to mess with IMF and how IMF messes with you.
Absolutely.
Look at the way their peso went down. I remember people were hiding their money in their pillow covers.
Absolutely.
And the devaluation was taking place. The accounts were even. I remember, sir, Muhammad Nawaz Sharif Saab, when he was the prime minister in 90s. They had a lot of programs, Qarz Utaro Mulk Samaro, if you remember. I don't know where that money went. And then they had another beautiful program, and that was about just making sure that all the foreign currency accounts, especially dollars, are frozen. And they were providing at 47, whereas the actual price was around 57.
Yeah, absolutely. We are
people are scared.
Really bad shape. Our foreign reserves are $9.5 billion, which is.
Which you can't even touch. You can't even use. That's not your money.
Yes, it's not our money.
It's just like that you keep a certain amount of your money in my account for a certain time period, and you tell me that you cannot use it. It is just there for the sake of being
Absolutely.
there. And if you do not pay me back at the right time with the right interest, I'll take away, snatch away, hostile takeover as they call it in banking.
That's true.
They'll snatch your
Snatch
properties.
it.
So very good, sir. What a lovely, perfect
So the
situation.
Bangladesh has 40 billion, India has 650 billion dollars. Is foreign reserve. We have to imagine we are living in South Asian region.
Sir, I was
We have
just
to
in
compare
fact giving an
ourselves.
example of
Yeah.
4 people: Adani,
Yeah.
Ambani, Mittal, and Tatas.
Tatas, yeah.
Their worth is more than the total economy of Pakistan. Total
True.
economy is 383 billion in Pakistan,
yeah.
and they are worth more. So this is the difference.
That's
Let's
true,
stop
that's true.
comparing
So
Pakistan
let's
with
rethink.
India.
Let us rethink.
I don't
Let's
know
try
why
to
we always
rethink.
end up doing that for our own
Let's try to rethink
mental
seriously,
peace, I
That's
would say.
true.
Now, coming to you, Dr. Ali Hasanain Saab, a couple of questions. First of all, sir, let's talk about the remedies. Now, we are stuck, but there has to be a way out. IMF is bad news, has always been bad news, but our own finance minister said that nobody is ready to lend us any money other than IMF. And obviously, when you talk about IMF, they will put those conditions, they have. And when you give them a certain document where you show that, okay, next year we will be having a budget surplus because you asked for it. Since you asked for it, see, this is what we have done. And they even know that this is not possible. That is not going to be materialized in any way, no matter what you do. Unless and until you start printing dollars in Pakistan, or ask the Americans to have a machine in Karachi or somewhere, in the State Bank of Pakistan, so that we can have as many dollars as we wish to. But that is not possible either. Any realistic approach, sir? Because the government believes that, charter of economy is something which we should follow. The thing is, sir, whenever I see the government ministers, they are bashing the previous government, Imran Khan. Whenever Imran Khan Saab comes or his party members come on TV, they start bashing the current government, calls it the imported government. That isn't the way forward, sir. Your take.
Absolutely, absolutely. But let me sort of expand on and make more precise, perhaps, how I see main problems of the economy, and then we can talk about solutions. So the first is that I don't think that IMF is our problem, and I don't think that IMF is our solution. We keep talking about the IMF. The main problem that Pakistan has is that we as a nation have not got our act together. We have to be very clear on that, and we should not be distracted either by looking at IMF as the last year almost we've been dissipating our energy, not talking about how to get our factories more productive, but whether we'll get the next IMF package or not. Right? So it's not part of the solution. It's given us 20 or 20, what is it, the number of programs that have come in is very large. At the same time, it is not our problem in the sense that the solution lies elsewhere. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is that we have to be very clear what our problem is precisely. Our problem is not that we are not growing. We are twice as rich per capita as we were in the year 2000. Think about that for a second. That means the Pakistani economy is growing. So what's the problem?
Sir, Zardari Saab says that our population is around 30 crore. Government says 22. If you do the math, then we both will end up being wrong.
Well, so we can't speculate on official numbers. Otherwise, we'll continue to speculate. The economy as measured by the State Bank, and by the way, the State and the PBS, which by the way have quite a decent reputation for countries of our level of development, give us GDP numbers, and we've got some population numbers that have been signed off on by a large part of the government, and for one individual, even at the level of Zardari Saab, to question that is neither here nor there in my mind. My problem is that we are not growing as fast as we could. So in this era, when we've been growing fast, we have gone from being 17% of the Indian economy to 12%, which means obviously they're growing much faster. Bangladesh is growing much faster. We are being left behind. That's one problem. The other problem is that government is not stable. Governance.
Political instability, yes.
So now, not political instability, but economic stability. And my conclusion is that a declining Pakistan, or at least a stagnant Pakistan, the Pakistani economy that we are worrying about today, suits the country's elites. And they have not shown a willingness to undertake the true reforms that would fix the economy. If you were to have aliens descend on Pakistan and look around and figure out who's winning in today's Pakistan, you'll find people, both civilian and otherwise, who are among the winners. And these are the people who could be undertaking true reform. You have to ask why the tax rate has not been increased by civilian governments and by other governments, because no one is willing to take the political pressure that will inevitably come when you bring into the tax net people who are not in the tax net right now. We have not secured, we have secured the borders, but we haven't secured your ability to ride around in any district you want. We have what we have known for 40 years as laureate, which means there's no investment in those places. We have not put property rights in place, which will allow transactions and markets to grow. We have not figured out contract enforcement. So if you write a contract with me, that is worth nothing. It's not worth the paper it's written on. And without these things, what happens is that everyone invests in DHAs. I can't invest in a plot outside DHA because property rights are not good. I can't invest in a firm that you're managing because I'm worried that you'll run away with my money. So you're talking about the economy. You haven't
Very
given me
very important point. So yeah, definitely, sir. But if you allow me, Dr. Saab, let me put the last question to Dr. Ikram ul-Haq Saab. That now, sir, let's talk about the borrowing, because borrowing, whether it's domestic borrowing by the government from the banks, or it's the international borrowing. Sir, I remember it was, well around 60% to the GDP. Now it has crossed 80%.
Yeah.
Correct, sir? And on top of that, that's a lot of money. When you talk about just paying off the interest, that is around 16%, sir. 16% is not a joke. Quick 1 minute comment, sir, that obviously, whatever you start looking at, you start digging into the issues, sir, problem seems to be there, unfortunately. Now, 16% on your percentage, that is what you're paying on your interest, as an interest on the money you've borrowed, and your tax to GDP ratio has crossed 80%. What is that supposed to mean now?
I think that borrowing issue is very important, that this is a strange, we are a place where the government has 80% borrowed money in their pocket and they are paying such high interest rate. So by these high interest rates, we are not concerned with that supply side of economics, and as well as that why are devaluation of rupees taking place. Why? By these high interest rates, we cannot control inflation at all. So my take is that stop borrowing and use your big resources that are available, sell them, and you will find that even I think the government-owned Jawads, they should not be there. This is not the style of the governance anywhere in the world. So these price land of the government occupied by certain elites, they must be vacated and they must be utilized by the government for better returns rather than borrowing. So in the end, it is a political economy issue, and I will say that economics is a serious thing and cannot be left to economists, but to speak of politicians. So this is serious challenges that Pakistan is facing. Structural reforms are very important, but more than that, we should have a change of mindset. That why we are still having elitist culture. If this elitist culture flourishes and keeps here, and they keep on buying, for example, they keep on even occupying
All right, sir.
expensive government land.
All right, Dr.
then
Ali
what will be
Hassan
the
Saab, I'm so sorry.
future of our
Sorry, Dr. Ikram, I'm so sorry to cut you here. But I'm totally running out of time. But sir, I would like to thank Dr. Ali Hassan Saab, Dr. Ikram ul Haq Saab, and Amir Hussain Saab. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence as well. That's all we have for this. I'll see you, inshallah, on Monday, inshallah. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz from our side.